we're going to be talking about kind of practical ways to implement all the foundational concepts that we covered in the first 6 classes. So we're kind of moving into more of the hands-on stuff now. And tonight, it's the 4 aspects of discipline. So any successful endeavor requires foundational principles, whether it's something as big as a quality home, or what are the basics that every home has to have? A foundation, and I guess you wouldn't have to have lumber for the structure, but most often. But then the finishing touches are where things can get unique with the paint or the different kinds of trims. Same thing for a really good cookie. You gotta have, I guess you could have oat flour or coconut flour. My friend's talking about, you gotta have a flour and you gotta have a leavening ingredient. And then the little things that whether, you like chocolate chips or not, or nuts or not, or coconut or not. And the successful parenting requires basic ingredients too, those foundational principles that we have talked about from the beginning, the big ideas that we went, that discipline is a part of love, that you want to shape your child's will while you're protecting their spirit. All of those are important, and every family needs to have those to successfully parent. But the finishing touches, the way you do things, because you have unique individuals, and it's going to be very different. And another one of those foundational principles that we talked about last week is answering, what are those 2 questions that kids always ask? Do you remember? Do you love me, and who's in charge? And they really want you at all times to be answering, yes, my dear one, I love you, and yes, I am in charge, because that gives them, when you answer those simultaneously, a sense of safety and security. But this happened when we taught the class a couple times ago. I had showed you what I did for chore charts, and it was like tons of work, but when I had 4 kids it takes forever to get it all done, but once it's done, you're just kind of like, because we tried it at first where it was like they'd come to me in the morning, okay, Mom, what, and I'd be trying to direct to here and there, and my oldest especially is a very ordered type person. He's the one who wants to come home, sit down, get his homework done, then he can relax. Same thing with anything like chores. It was so much better for him if he just had a list. He could just plow right through it and get it done and go on. And then there's his brother Peter who's got his helmet on and his sword as he's going, vacuuming or something like that. It was always an adventure. So one of the moms came up where she has little Velcro on here, and I guess every day it was easier for her to have little pictures and put them up. And so the foundational principle that you're doing with chores is helping them develop self-control, that you're helping them feel like they are part of the family. You're actually growing self-worth in them as they recognize they can handle tasks and they're part of the family, and so they're growing in confidence. Last week, our big idea was you can grow and become a balanced parent. And that was the parent who's conveying simultaneously, yes, I love you, and yes, I'm in charge. And if you remember, there was a quadrant, and we looked at what helps kids grow up and to be successful, kids who get along with their parents and other peers and adults in authority, and who feel good about themselves. And it really is parents who both are high love and high control or high demandingness. So we want to make sure that we're answering both of those questions. Yes, all the time. So let's get into big idea 9. That is can be a way that we flesh out that principle of how we answer those two questions. There's 4 levels of discipline that need to happen in sequence in order to be effective. Typically, we only kind of think of one. As I go through them, you think, which is the one that most people say in America? If you'd say discipline, what would they think? Level 1, and I'm going to go through them quickly and then we'll go back and go in detail, is instruction. Basically, letting your kids know what's expected of them. And then level 2 is training, helping them learn how to actually do what they've been instructed about. And then level 3 is correction, and that is, do you think most people when they think of discipline, that's what they're thinking of? You see some kind of behavior and you think, that has got to stop. And you want to go straight in to doing something. And we'll talk more about different ways that we use correction. And then one that's hardly ever talked about that's very important is closure. Children need to know when the time of correction is over. It helps them relax and feel safe. And actually, sometimes it's very important for the parent too to know, okay, we're done with that, and we're gonna move on. The word discipline comes from 2 Greek words, which together mean learning to have self-control and soundness of mind. So there's a lot more than just correction that's needed if we want to help a child learn to have self-control and soundness of mind. When we don't use all 4 levels, and maybe we just end up yelling or screaming or whining, trying to control our children's behavior, well, for one thing, we're modeling behavior that we don't want them to do, and so that kind of defeats the purpose. And it may initially seem overwhelming, like, okay, in the heat of the moment, how am I going to do instruction and training? But when you kind of get in the flow of it and a pattern of it, and it all kind of goes together seamlessly, you will find that you have to use less correction. And so, which is a benefit both for you and for them when you're focusing on all 4 aspects. So life gets much less chaotic if we get all 4 levels and get them in sequence. But before we look in depth at them, we want to note that communication is another foundation. It's the foundation of all 4 levels of discipline. And the healthier and more effective our communication is at each level, it will increase how effective the outcome is of what we're trying to get to. This Dennis the Menace cartoon captures a major mistake we often make when we're trying to communicate with our kids. He's being dragged away from some sort of misbehavior, and he tells his mom, "But you told me to behave. You didn't say how." And the truth is, oftentimes when we talk to our kids, we can be vague, and it makes perfect sense to us. Stop that. You behave. And they're kind of going, and from across the room, maybe they're doing multiple things all at once, and they're not really sure exactly what we mean. We need to be very specific, like stop jumping on the couch, or stop pulling your sister's hair, but specific things. But when we now, those are pretty maybe intuitive things, but that they would get what you wanted them to stop. But sometimes it's not as clear to them when they're just playing and having fun what you think is inappropriate. So we need to be very clear at all 4 levels of discipline. And in our communication, it's again, and we say this over and over, but that's because it's so important. All of our communication needs to be filled with favor and affection for our kids. And that is what will make the key to getting into their hearts and really speaking to them where they want to grow in self-control, and their wills will be shaped. It's both possible and desirable to convey high favor and affection while you are holding a firm line. You are clearly and firmly saying, yes, I am in charge and I am requiring obedience. But you can do it in a way that also conveys favor and affection. Jesus knew the favor of his Father. In Matthew 3:17, when Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist and he came back out of the water, a voice from heaven said, "This is my dearly loved Son who brings me great joy." And the Heavenly Father went on to ask his Son to do very, very hard things. And I like it when Kathy teaches this class, she talks about how we sometimes can think of Jesus as like a Superman. He was fully God, but he was also fully man. And so these things, it wasn't like it was, well, obviously he sweat drops of blood in the garden. He was also fully man. These were hard things to do. But I think he was so in tune and had heard this with his Father, and had heard the Father express such great favor and affection to him, that it enabled him to do those hard things. When we exert our appropriate authority and control over our children with great favor and affection, we give them a taste of the favor that God has for them. Ken Wilson, in a book called The Obedient Child, writes, "When God brings us into the life of Christ, we begin to taste something that is indeed food for our spirits and water for the parched ground of our souls, the favor of God." And so, as we are being God's ambassadors, we want to pass on that great favor that he has for us and to our kids. Psalm 30 verse 5 says, "For his anger lasts only a moment, but his favor lasts a lifetime. His goodness and mercy pursue us. They come after us all the days of our lives," from Psalm 23. And Proverbs 15:4 graphically describes the truth from the negative side. "Kind words heal and help. Cutting words wound and maim." Our words are so powerful, and I'm sure you've experienced, like Tom was expecting, maybe when he came home tonight, there would be powerful words that were not kind. But because in our families is often the place where we are most prone to using those words that wound and maim. And again, it's got to be that, Lord help me. That encouraged me that Sam was using from Psalms 107. When we get in a time of distress, whether it's our kids that are distressing us or work or whatever, that we can say, "Lord help me," and he will, because he listens to the prayers of his people. But as far as wounding words, do you know what the statistics are for every negative word you hear? How many positives you need? What are you saying? I can't.
8 of them.
8 of them? Yeah, I went online and looked up. It's a minimum of 5 and can be upwards and even more. And like in businesses, if one negative review on your business, you have to have it like outweighed by like 30 or something. It's like, but in our words, those, because they can cut us to the soul, and we need to make sure with our kids that we are guarding the things that we say. Here are 2 cartoons that capture the power of favor and affection in communication, and they're just so sweet, and in discipline. This little boy's name is Pasquale. And he's sitting in front of the TV and he says, "Here she comes to tell me to take a bath. But I'm ready with a million reasons not to." She leans down and whispers, "It's time to take a bath." And then there he is, having fun in the bathtub. Anything sounds like fun if it's whispered. And so, on another night, his mom comes and whispers. She whispered, "Go to bed. Anything whispered sounds so good you can't say no." Psst. Can I have some ice cream? And then you see them in the kitchen having their ice cream. Now, of course, you can't always do that, but there might be times when you can. And just the whole idea that she's requiring his obedience. It's time to get in the bath. It's time to go to bed. But we can do it in a way with favor and affection that makes it easier for our kids to obey. For some reason, now we're going to go on to level 1, instruction. It is very easy for us as parents to forget the essential truth that our kids come into this world knowing absolutely nothing. And they are continually faced with situations where they don't know what to expect or how to behave. It would be a lot like, have any of you traveled to a foreign country where it was now even in Western foreign, like France or things, still they speak French. You can't always see where you're supposed to go, but and even in non-Western countries, there's so many cultural rules, and you can do something offensive without even knowing it. And our kids are like that. Lots of different situations. You know, you take them to a wedding for the first time, or the first time you have to ask them to sit through some kind of a church service or a talk or something like that. I was trying to think, you take them to something besides McDonald's. I don't know, maybe McDonald's is taboo, but to a nicer restaurant. And there's different things that if ahead of time you can say, okay, we're going to go to this wedding. There's going to be a time where you have to sit for quite a while, and a lot of grown-up, I was going to say it's going to be really boring, but maybe for them, maybe you want to say, and there's a lot of going to be grown-up talk, but I brought you some crayons and things, and we have to do it very quiet, but we're going to sit still, and then we're going to get to go to a party, and you can run and play and have cake and ice cream. But to help them know that something that might be a challenge for them is coming ahead. Maybe going to an airport, I don't know, just things that to try to anticipate ahead of time. I need to instruct them in how they should behave. When we forget to tell our kids instructions ahead of time, we just set them up for misbehavior because they don't know what to expect. So the definition of instruction is to teach the child the right way to go, what is expected, and how to do things, and to provide direction by modeling, teaching, and commanding, giving orders. And the key ways to instruct are by modeling. So you're setting an example, and once again, if it's a lot of yelling or whining or why can't you just, then we're modeling for them what we don't want them to be doing. Then also through informal instruction. Parent uses everyday situations and occurrences as opportunities to show and values and to show the child how to do things. So as we're going through, we're just talking and explaining. Parenting is a lot of talking. But you know what? It's worth it when you get to the other end. It's a lot of explaining. And then there's also formal instruction, setting aside specific times for instruction and teaching kids. Kathy tells the story of a young mom who came to her class once, and she had a 14-month-old little girl who was continually always talking in a really loud voice. And it wasn't so much that she was being disobedient, or she just was high volume, but only 14 months. And Kathy had said, well, why don't you try sitting down with her and instructing her in an inside voice and an outside voice, and that sometimes we need to use a quiet voice, but when you're outside, you can talk as loud as you want. And the mom was kind of like, well, she's 14 months, but she tried it. It made a huge difference. Now, it's not a guarantee it's going to be for every child, but for this little girl, once she could understand what was expected of her, not just that there were times she could talk at a high volume and times when she needed to use a quieter voice, it made a very big difference. Say you're dealing with a toddler who wants to watch, I don't know, do they watch something do you have an iPad? Do they watch things on TV? What do you do now? Do they watch anything? Do you not let them have screen time? And you say, you can watch one episode, and then, but to a little one, of course, when the episode is done, they're going to be like, no, I want, because it's probably left at a cliffhanger or something. But that we need to instruct them and say, no, when you start, and we'll talk a little bit more how we train them to do that obediently, but and then as we go into training, but instruction to let them know ahead of time, or you are going to have 30 minutes to play. And you were saying outside. Now, do you let them know too?
Oh, yeah.
And so tell what do you do about the outside play?
I just set a timer and I say when the timer goes off, we have one more slide, and then we go inside. But
yes. So they know what to expect, and so you're instructing them in how the time is going to go. When I used to be the children's director here, there was, you'd set out all the different little pieces for a craft, and one little child just, there was one piece missing, and just say, you don't need to cry. All you need to say is, Miss Marianne, can I have a piece? And I'll say, sure. I'd love for you to be happy and do that. So, but just that we need to say and help them understand what kind of voice to use and how to respond. Another example of formal instruction that Kathy uses was when their son Jed was in 6th grade, and he was headed off to school every morning, and he was chronically late. And so it would end up, well, it came to a big head one morning when they got ready to get in the car, or had like a minute or two to go, and he said, oh yeah, Mom, I need a medieval costume today. Yeah, she said, and she lost it, and they just realized, she and her husband, they needed to sit down and work out a plan. And she didn't go into the details, but of expectations, maybe things that he needed to do the night before, or certain things that had to be done, or in an order, so that they had and then they sat down, gave the expectation, gave clear consequences for what would happen if you didn't meet those expectations, and then so doing a very formal instruction. I think I told you already, when our kids turned 10, that was the wonder birthday. They got to start cleaning a bathroom. And so, but the same thing. So the first time, they would come in and watch me, because of course, I don't want to just tell them, go in and clean the bathroom, because we're talking 3 boys. No, I shouldn't say that. Very different personalities. Each one cleans a bathroom very differently. But, and to say, watch me the way I do it. And then I told you I was so OCD. I tried to find it. It's gone. A sheet of the steps to cleaning the bathroom, the sink and the tub and the toilet, that kind of thing. And then I think a time maybe I watched them do it, because these are all brand new things. They don't know what to do. And of course, you're teaching them to do it your way. But it's fine to say too, when you grow up and go, you might want to do it a whole different way. And that's perfectly fine. But this is the way I'd like it done, while you're here and in my house. So there you are giving them clear instruction. Just like with Jed, and an issue coming up, that if you have a chronic problem going on in your house, and it's happening over and over, it's a time to kind of think to myself, okay, is this a time where I need to, and maybe especially you might need to work together with the dad and the mom and say, what's our plan here? Let's come up with some clear instruction, because this behavior is going to drive the whole family crazy. So how can we teach them what they need to do? The overall discipline of children is greatly helped if you have some ongoing instruction in place, not just responding to situations. All families have rules. Some of them are unspoken, and all people have rules. But establishing clear rules helps create a climate of smoothness to the environment of your home. If you have clear rules and they're consistently enforced, then you've created this routine and it provides some consistency. So there's two types of rules. There are demands that are in effect over a long period of time, which reflect the values and priorities of your family. There's all kinds of posters like this. We actually have one hanging up in our kitchen that has "Be kind to one another" and then the verse reference. And looking back, I wish I'd have maybe taken one a week, one a month, and actually maybe at dinner read it once and talked about why is this important in our family? Just to help, or try new things. Why is it important as a family that we try new things? But you talk about that with your kids. And some of them, like for us, a big one, when people were talking and things were said, was that mean or kind? And I encourage that so much in families because, like Tom says, your kids, you hope, will develop relationships that will last for life. And the only way that's going to happen is because kids can, just because they're grumpy or sometimes just because they're ornery, can be mean to each other. But we need to continually be teaching them in our family, what we say needs to be kind. And did that tear down or did that build up? We want to build each other up. We want to say kind words. And then there's also specific rules about chores and personal habits that are enforced over shorter periods of time. You're teaching them to brush their teeth. Okay, and hopefully after, I don't know, for some of them, it never really settled in until they started dating or getting like brushing their teeth. But you're hoping, you're instructing and setting rules. This needs to happen every night. That becomes a habit. That then you go on to a different thing. They're done with that one. Let's go on to another. And thinking again about communication and the role of favor and affection. Josh McDowell, who has worked a lot with teenagers as a Christian apologetics man, says that rules without relationship result in rebellion. So it's all part of, our rules are part of the relationship we have with our kids. So here's some example of appropriate family rules that reflect the values and priorities of a family over a long period of time. So these three sets of rules, there's one we're going to come to, they all kind of reflect the same core values, but they're in different age-appropriate ways. So for preschoolers, and you will say this over and over and over, or you can, God gave us to you to be your mommy and your daddy, and our job, we don't want to say, and our job, it's our job and our joy and our privilege is to love you and take care of you and to help you grow up and to teach you to obey. And while growing up, your job, you only have one job, and that's to obey us. And that's based on Ephesians 6, 1-4. So for those little ones, ages 2 up through like 4, maybe 5, it's just that, God gave you to us. It's our job to take care of you. You have one job, and that's to obey. For school-age children, once they start like kindergarten, there are 3. These are rules that Kathy used when she was children's director at the church where our kids went when they were little, and I used them when I was the children's director here at Timberview, because it's very helpful for kids to have a structure so that then if you have behavior that isn't appropriate, you have someplace to direct. And so I did post them on the rules, but we would talk about them. When we did an opening time, I'd say, okay, what are our rules at Timberview Kids? And respect and obey your parents, teachers, and other adults, especially those in authority. And respect each other and respect the property. So, and then, on different times we talk about it. So, if you're taking the crayons and you're breaking them in half, is that respecting the property? Just helping them learn, because those are big words for little ones. Respect the property. What in the word does that mean? That we'd have to talk about what that meant. And then, but I added this part, that their job was to listen, not only with their ears, but with their eyes and their mouths, and to obey. And then we get to the last one, have fun. Because really, if everyone's listening and obeying, there is a lot more fun. When you have a classroom, if you have real discipline problems, it just takes so much away from the whole class. These 3 rules, like Kathy says, cover pretty much every deviant behavior known to man. So when something happens, you can point back to it and say, wait a minute, was that respecting each other or the property? And these would be an example of appropriate family rules for the teens. Stony Brook School is a boarding school and a prep school for grades 7 to 12 in New York. And it had a character-based approach to education. And the founder wrote this: preparation for life is more than preparation for college. To find success in life, young people must possess more than a superior education. They also need to develop strength of character. So, because it was a boarding school, their rules might be similar to rules you might have as parents for teenagers. And the rules show an appropriate, remember, we're releasing them more and more. So if they have been trained in obedience and respect and responsibility, then they're ready for rules like this. 4 rules only. If it's right, enjoy. If it's wrong, you know what to do. If you're not sure, it's probably wrong. And you can call us anytime, anyway. And we use that with our kids all the time, especially when they were teenagers. Just tell them your mom will kill you. No. Or, I can't do that. Okay, I would not really do that, and they knew that. But they could call us anytime. And now they have cell phones. They could, do it easily, but and to use us as an excuse if they wanted to. Okay, on to training. When the parent helps the child put the instruction into practice, including instruction for obedience. So the definition of training is to help a child form habits and develop proficiency in areas in which he has been or she instructed. So this covers the basic rules of your family, as well as a wide range of things like personal hygiene habits, household chores, cooking, learning to repair something, learning math or a difficult subject in school, playing sports, all kinds of things. You want to not only just instruct them, but then train them. And the basic ways to train a child include doing things with the child, instructing while you do it together, teaching a complex task or concept. What did I do? Whoops, I'm going the wrong way. There we go. One step at a time. And then talking about an issue to give deeper knowledge and clear up misconceptions, and determining the child's ability in relationship to the skill or concept he's learning. You may think, you're teaching them to mop the floor, and you realize, oh my goodness, we need to wait a year or two on this one, then it's too much for them. So we can, as you're working with them, you will notice that. So back to that idea where the 2.5-year-old is watching one more episode, but of course they're 2.5. So what happens when, even though you said, okay, only one more episode, and then we're going to be done. When it's over, they're like, I want one more. And so that we okay, at the beginning we say, now when it's over, the way obedience looks is when it'll be time then to take your bath, and when your mom calls, you'll say, come in, mommy, and respond obediently. And you'll have to remind them, they're 2.5. When it's over, now wait a minute. Remember, we talked about it. What does obedience look like? You say, come in, mommy. And so to train them to do that. Dinner time I always felt like was chaotic. We didn't have set chores at dinner time. It was just like two rules. One, see what needs to be done and do it. And if you can't see anything, then ask me. Don't go hide in the room. You come and you say, what can I do now? And it got so that getting to the table was a much easier job if they would come and say, well, what can I do now? But also the key was when they get old enough, see what needs to be done and do it. So both of those kind of things. So the aim of training, I'm going backwards again. There we go. Is to help your child obey and mature. Learning to obey is hard. It's hard for us. We set goals. We want to walk 3 times a week. But when it comes time to actually do it, do we do it? So your child needs loving, firm help in learning obedience. Now remember, we also want to distinguish between willful defiance and childish immaturity and irresponsibility. So we want to aim at training for obedience if the child is willfully defiant. So again, what does obedience look like? Coming, Mom, or okay, here I come, or what do you want me to do now? And then if we want to aim at teaching life skills and strengthening character, when misbehavior results from immaturity and irresponsibility. So the spilled milk is not willful defiance, it's childish, and so we want to train and work with them to teach them how to take care of that. Or maybe train them, instead of setting your milk on the edge of the table, you put it up here. But again, lots of instruction. Or if they're having a meltdown on a rough day, when, maybe you need to just go sit quiet for a few minutes, that kind of things. 1 Thessalonians 2, 11-12 in the Message version captures kind of the feeling and the flavor of how to instruct and train a child with favor and affection. With each of you, we were like a father with his child, holding your hand, whispering encouragement, showing you step by step how to live well before God, who called us into his own kingdom, into this delightful life. And children thrive and respond best to instruction and training when it comes with tenderness and love and encouragement. I know you can do this. If we give our instruction and training, it's hard. Sometimes even that spilled milk at the end of a long day, and how many times have you told them not to put their milk on the edge of the table? It can be easy to say, now, just a minute, we talked about that. What was the problem? And you put it back, and so go get a towel, and we'll wipe this up. But if we can use a kind and encouraging way, and you're gonna get it. We just need to remember to put it where it belongs. But if we use a harsh, demanding tone, children become discouraged. They're just little and angry and rebellious, and their spirits get wounded. So we want to give clear instruction and have firm rules, but to do it with favor and affection. Correction. So even though oftentimes this is where we jump to, we need to remember that if we jump to this correction without first instruction and training, oftentimes the correction isn't very effective and it can cause resentment and rebellion. They may be like, I didn't know. And however, correction is necessary and an important part of discipline. So the definition: to alter or adjust a child's behavior by taking action, that's the key, to cause him or her to follow previous instruction and training. So you've instructed and you've trained and the action isn't happening. What's Newton's first law? Anybody know? An object that is still stays still, or an object in motion stays in motion unless it's acted upon by a force. And so that's your job. If there's something that needs, you have to take action to get action. Okay, ways of correction is a big subject, but there's a brief introduction, and we'll be talking more about them as we get into each age group and things that we use. First, determine whether the behavior that needs correction is from willful defiance or childish immaturity, and choose the best strategy for discipline. And there's lots of possible ways, but direct, assertive communication, spanking, only for ages 2 through 6 to 7, and actually, I'm going to bring my little doll next week and give you a spanking demonstration, which may seem kind of silly, but actually was very helpful for me when I saw it, because it's a very loving and it's firm, but very much helps the child understand they never have to choose another spanking if they don't choose to disobey. It puts a lot into their hands. So we'll go over that next week with little ones. Spanking is the intentional use of physical pain that the child knows ahead of time will be the consequence if he disobeys parental authority. So it's something that they know ahead of time that they're choosing, and we'll go over that next week. A timeout, a planned time to regroup when they're having a bad attitude. I found, and we added, because I had 3 boys, that we didn't always need times out. We needed physical activity to help use up the excess energy. So there would be, go run 3 laps around the back, or if it's in the dead of winter, though, we have been known to inappropriately give laps in the snow.
Pretty abusive.
So, in the winter, it's,
They knew they shouldn't do that, though.
give me 5 push-ups. But, and then at the end is rewards. And we'll talk about them a little more later too, but these are the least effective and the most dangerous. Because if your child's in the backyard and you say, it's time to come in, and you've warned them, and the timer rang, and instead of saying, okay, we're gonna go, because you're trying to teach them to obey, and obedience is crucial for them to have a good life, instead you say, well, I'll give you ice cream if you go inside, you are just bribing them. And then they're going to, and it builds into more and more. So we want to avoid that. Now, sometimes, you have different personalities. When I was homeschooling,
Yeah, that's true.
yes, and
Sometimes she won't come inside.
yes.
Very nice.
Well, and you know what? You are. And each child is unique, and you're dealing with a unique child, and especially children who come from hard places. Sometimes we have to use different strategies with them because they have ingrained things deep inside them. But and there's appropriate use for rewards. Like I think potty training is a great one because we have little charts and they got little stickers, and at the end, Peter one time was asked to be a ring bearer in a wedding, and he did not want to be a ring bearer. And but it was really, I tried to help him understand it's an honor, but he's what, 5, 6? He's like, I'm gonna put on this hot suit. And so I was like, what was it, Bionicles or something? It was some kind of really, it was kind of, okay, I know that you don't want to do this, but if you're cheerful and you do it nicely and you act well, there's a So sometimes, especially when we're asking our kids to kind of do above and beyond. There's times, but we try to use it as little as we can. So, now did I go through this whole thing again and then I just backed up? I'm not doing this very well today. So rewards, as little as possible. So we're gonna have an object lesson. Passing these out. Everybody take one. Okay, this is a crybaby. And don't put it in quite yet. But this is a lesson that helps us grasp the reality of the emotional experience connected to correction. First and foremost for the child, but also for the parent. Okay, so when correction is happening, okay, this is a little corny, but it feels, if you want to put it in now, you can, but you can't bite it yet, or you can wait a little bit. It feels sourful, or sorrowful, but later it produces sweet results. And chewing this sour candy illustrates this truth in a memorable way. So Ephesians 12:11 says, no discipline is enjoyable while it is happening. It's painful, so go ahead and put it in and don't chew yet, just suck on it. I haven't done it yet. Is it pretty sour or not that bad?
It's not too bad.
It's not too bad. But afterward, that's what I want to see. I want to see that sour. But afterward, there will be a peaceful harvest. Now you can bite into it, of right living. So is it sweet in the middle? For those who are trained in this way. So when we first go through correction, it is a time of sorrow or sour. But then, if we go through it, there's the peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. That's a good reminder to you as a parent, too. If it is a sweet experience for you to give correction, you are not in the right moment. You're probably correcting out of anger. It's actually, it needs to be a sorrowful time. You are sorry that they have chosen to disobey, because you know that if they continue down that path, where it leads. And the other thing is sometimes a kid, rather than really biting into the correction and letting it really alter their behavior, it's kind of like they tuck it into the corner of their mouth. It's what's that thing? They are sitting down on the outside, but they're standing up on the inside. They're resisting, and we'll talk about that more with the different ages, how to help them learn through their correction. And we can say it to our kids. You know, I know it's going to be a bummer not to have that toy to play with for a time, or I know that this spanking is going to hurt, but I'm doing it because I want good for you. I love you, and I know that learning to obey will bring good things and sweetness to your life. And it's important for us sometimes as parents to know too, because our kids are going to be sorrowful and crying and and to know that it's okay. It's a good thing for us not to be the bad guy, because we're doing it because out of favor and affection and what we want good for them. But it will be sorrowful, because correction needs to be that way for it really to be effective in their lives. And the final level is closure. It is a very important step in terms of encouraging your child and establishing true peace and joy in your home. And the definition of closure is to clearly communicate to your child that the time of correction is over, and to assure your child that you're not angry or holding anything against him because of his need for correction. Without clear closure, a child can be kind of nervous or afraid, not really know it's done, and maybe they're wondering, is mom or dad still angry at me, or am I going to be in trouble again without warning? And oftentimes we as parents need to know too, okay, we've dealt with this, we've had correction, now I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to, one of the important things we learned when we were doing premarital counseling is not in our talking, when we're fighting, not to have hurt museums is what it is, to bring up all the things in the past. And as parents with our kids, we need to deal with that time and not, you know, why am I having to deal with this again? Well, it's because you're a parent of their child and it's part of the job. And some of them harder than others. Okay, so ways of bringing closure need to be direct, clear, and loving. So with a younger child, to hug and lovingly talk with them after the correction ends. And it can be a great time to deepen your intimacy with the child. And with an older child, you know, explain when and how the correction will end. And then when the time of correction is over, affirm your love for the child. You know, we're done. Here's your cell phone back. I know you can make better choices in the future. The final step of closure helps the peaceful harvest of right living to grow in your child and in your family. If we keep on with blame and shame, it creates an environment in our home of anxiety or fear, unhappiness. So we don't want the hurt museums. We want to have our time of closure and to go back to a time of peace. And one of the most beautiful truths about God revealed in the Bible is that when God corrects his children, he also quickly forgives. And this brings joy. 1 John 1:9 says, if we confess our sins to him, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all wickedness. So not only does he forgive us, but he cleanses us from any remnants of that sin. Or it talks about he removes our sins from us as far as the east is from the west. And in Romans 4:7, oh, what joy for those whose disobedience is forgiven, whose sins are put out of sight. So when children know they're forgiven and their disobedience has been put out of sight, they're free to go forward with an increased desire to obey in the future. So, quick look back at the big idea. Those 4 levels of discipline, they need to happen in sequence for our discipline to be effective. Instruction, then training, correction, and closure. And there's kind of a shorthand to remind you. It's ITCC. And sometimes if you find you're in one of those chronic behaviors or something's happening in your family and things are not going too well, something keeps repeating itself, you may want to use that and think, okay, have I instructed? Have I trained? You know, have I gone through the 4 steps? And to even ask the Holy Spirit, show me what do I need to help this child in this area learn how to obey? And am I communicating favor and affection to them, not just through my discipline, not just anger or frustration? You know, there are all kinds of things. Sometimes that might make a child have a harder time learning to obey. Kids who come from hard places, my heart goes out to you. There's lots of things that happen, you know, deep formational things. And so, you know, sometimes it's our own fault. They didn't get their nap because we were out doing something, and so they're going to have a harder time. And we need to reflect in our discipline, understanding for those things. But when we do them in sequence, it can really help our kids. I'm going to have you guys all read The Kissing Hand? It's kind of a sweet story that is a picture of showing favor and affection in our discipline. So I'll do it real quick up here. We're a little... Can I read real quick, Tom?
Sure.
I'll go fast.
Sure.
Chester Raccoon stood at the edge of the forest and cried, I don't want to go to school, he told his mother. I want to stay home with you. I want to play with my friends and play with my toys and read my books and swing on my swing. Please, may I stay home with you? Mrs. Raccoon took Chester by the hand and nuzzled him on the ear. Sometimes we all have to do things we don't want to do, she told him gently, even if they seem strange and scary at first. but you will love school once you start. You'll make new friends and play with new toys, read new books and swing on new swings. Besides, she added, I know a wonderful secret that will make your nights at school seem as warm and cozy as your days at home. Chester wiped away his tears and looked interested. A secret? What kind of secret? A very old secret, said Mrs. Raccoon. I learned it from my mother, and she learned it from hers. It's called the kissing hand. The kissing hand? Asked Chester. What's that? I'll show you. Mrs. Raccoon took Chester's left hand and spread open his tiny fingers into a fan. Leaning forward, she kissed Chester right in the middle of his palm. Chester felt his mother's kiss rush from his hand up his arm and into his heart. Even his silky black mask tingled with a special warmth. Mrs. Raccoon smiled. Now, she told Chester, whenever you feel lonely and need a little loving from home, just press your hand to your cheek and think, Mommy loves you, Mommy loves you. And that very kiss will jump to your face and fill you with toasty, warm thoughts. She took Chester's hand and carefully wrapped his fingers around the kiss. Now, do be careful not to lose it, she teased him. But don't worry, when you open your hand and wash your food, I promise this kiss will stick. Chester loved his kissing hand. Now he knew his mother's love would go with him wherever he went, even to school. That night, Chester stood in front of his school and looked thoughtful. Suddenly, he turned to his mother and grinned. Give me your hand, he said. Chester took his mother's hand in his own and unfolded her large, familiar fingers into a fan. Next, he leaned forward and kissed the center of her hand. Now you have a kissing hand too, he told her. And with a gentle goodbye and I love you, Chester turned and danced away. Mrs. Raccoon watched Chester scamper across a tree limb and enter school, and as the hoot owl rang in the new school year, she pressed her left hand to her cheek and smiled. The warmth of Chester's kiss filled her heart with special words. Chester loves you, it sang. And there they all are, having fun in the woodland school. I love you. But just away where the mother she's demanding obedience. He's going to go to school, but she's doing it with favor and affection, training him, instructing him in ways that he can get through his day.